Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today we have a really easy build for you, really simple build, but something that's going to really help a ton in my classroom. We're lucky we have 10 3D printers, but we have all kinds of different pieces like this in here. So we have nozzles, we have wrenches for the nozzles, we have screwdrivers, we have all kinds of different pieces. We have 10 boxes worth of those little things, but somehow I always seem to lose said pieces. So in my never-ending pursuit of classroom organization, and so far my failure at said organization, we're going to tackle that today. That way, come school year, I know exactly where all my nozzles are going to be when we need to change them. It's going to make my life just a little bit easier in that one facet, and little by little we're gonna win this fight, or probably not, but that's okay. So it's a pretty simple build. There's not much to it, but I have some measurements ready to go. We'll talk about those in the video. So without further ado, let's just get right into the build. We're gonna start heading in to Fusion and start working. So what I came up with for the actual size of the organizer itself is going to be 120 millimeters long, 50 millimeters wide, and then 50 millimeters tall. So a lot of times with these, I like to stick to very standard measurements. And we'll talk a little bit more about the reasoning for the width and the height here in a second. But for the length itself, I am going to have at most 10 nozzles at a time for the most part, right? So what my thought was is I want about 10 millimeters worth of space for each nozzle, which gets me to 100 millimeters. Again, space on both sides so they don't touch, rub together, etc. And then I want a 10 millimeter label on each side of the tier in order to just know which nozzle should be in which tier. So with that being said, that gives me my 100 millimeters by 50 millimeter rectangle. Now the 50 is just because I know I want 5 tiers, and my thought again, kind of the same thing, 10 millimeters per tier makes life super easy. Okay, the 50 millimeter part, what I get to if I take this, I'm gonna extrude that, take that to 50 millimeters, simple there, is I had a design earlier that was smaller and thinner. Now you can do that smaller and thinner design if you want to save material, if it works for you. For me, I just liked a little bit of a bulkier piece. It sat nicer in my drawer. It wasn't as easily hidden. For me, it just worked better. You're more than welcome to make it smaller to fit your needs, okay? So now that I have the actual block done, again, 120, 50 by 50, what I'm gonna do is start by making out the shape on the side here. So as I just said, what I'm going to do is I want those 5 tiers. So I'm going to divide those 5 tiers into 10 millimeter sections, 5 millimeters down, 10 over, 5 down, the entire way across. So I take my line tool, I'm going to go 10. Again, I can just click L for line, go 5, 10, entire piece. Again, even looking back on it now, this might be just a little big. You can certainly take smaller space. One of the things you will have to keep in mind is there are going to be holes that we're going to make for the nozzles themselves. So that's something to keep in mind. But again, if you want to bring some of that material up, completely get that as well. Now, click on the actual piece here you want to take out, E for extrude, and go down that way. Again, I prefer this method. I like to build from the ground up rather than making that L shape to start. It's just my preference. I like subtractive rather than additive. It's up to you, whatever you wanted to do from that stage there. So now that I have the actual tiers cut out, the 4 tiers here are going to be the tiers that are actually going to hold the nozzles, right? 4 different sizes, 0.25, 0.4, 0.6, and 0.8. Now, as we talked about earlier, I want a small label on each of the tiers to make sure I know which one should go which place. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click on the topmost tier. Again, the topmost one I'm going to have for my screwdrivers, my wrenches, etc. So I want the second highest one here, and then I'm just going to make sure that everything is lined up correctly, okay? As I said previously, that label on the side here is going to be about 10 millimeters. So when I'm going to this specific point, I'm looking for the middle point of that tier, okay? So I'm looking for that 5 millimeter point. You can make a line up here, 5, and then I'm going to do 10 over, just so I know I have the complete size here. Do the same thing, go 5, and then 10 here. All right, so now that I have those labels done, what I'm gonna do is try and be as accurate as possible with the distance between my actual openings themselves for the nozzles. So what I'm gonna do is, again, based off those measurements earlier, I want an opening that's gonna be about 6.5 millimeters, okay? So taking that into account, what I wanna look for is just making sure that the opening of that circle does not go past this particular point. So in theory, what I can do is create an opening that's going to be 3.25, right? The radius half of my opening. Okay, and I can make my circle directly on this point and get that to right at 6.5. Okay, now what I'm going to do then is do the same thing on the other side here. Just make a 3.25. And then just so I can see exactly where that point's going to be, and I realize that this is kind of redundant then, but what I'm going to do here is just for peace of mind on my own, is I'm going to take this point here and just bring this up a little bit. That way I know exactly where that corner is going to meet, is where I want my other circle to be. Okay, so now what I can do is I'll take that individual circle itself and go to Create, Rectangular Pattern Tool. And what I'm going to do is just drag this out to that point, and I can zoom in here and make sure that it lines up perfectly with that other side. So I know it's going to be the exact same distance away from each of the sides. And now all I can do here, or all I need to do here, excuse me, if I can, there we go. Line that up here, is I'm going to bring that up to 10, which is exactly what I'm looking for each of my rows. Now, from here, what I'm going to do is just make that same row, and I'm just going to bring them down to the other 4. Okay, so I want that quantity to be 4, because I know that as I bring this down, I want 4 total rows. Okay, now the nice part about this is I'm going to use this extent distribution, because what I want is essentially that these center points are going to be 10 millimeters apart from each other. It means they're going to be perfectly aligned, perfectly centered on each of the tiers. So looking at this then, what I know is that's going to be 10 millimeters from here to here, 10 from here to here, 10 from here to here. Again, that's why I like to build in very easy numbers. That way it's easy for me to replicate this rectangular pattern tool here. Click OK. Now I have each of my openings ready to go. So next step here, I know that I have 7 millimeters from the head of that nozzle to the bottom part of that nozzle. So what I'm going to do is just make an 8 millimeter opening, or 8 millimeter depth, just so that the head of that nozzle is going to sit directly on top of the print itself. Now I'm going to have to adjust these just so that each of these are going to be their own separate depth, but that's a small price to pay for all of these being easy to make. So I'm going to go to extrude. I'm just going to click on each of these here. Oops, I did a lot. All right, now that I have this done, I can set this to -8, hit enter, and I am good to go there. Now, with the rest of these here, if I just go back in, right click and go to edit sketch, I have these other ones that I can select easily. If I just go to E for extrude, I can click these all. They might disappear, but again, right click, edit sketch, they'll come back up just fine. Okay. Now with the rest of these here, all I have to do is add 5 for each layer. So this is going to be 5 millimeters plus that 8, going to get me to 13, and then it's going to be 5 more and 5 more down, get the rest of these 8 millimeter depth openings. All right, and just like that, all of my openings are good to go here. Okay, so I have all of the openings for my nozzles. Next step here is I'm going to work on the text on each of the sides here. So what I'm going to do is, again, click on the top part here. And for each of these, again, it doesn't really matter how these go in, but what I'm going to do is just create a text box here. So if I go to create text, kind of zoom in on this point and click and drag this just so it lines up perfectly with the outside. I'm going to do 0.25, okay, and then I'm just going to shrink that text down. Again, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be. Let me go that, align that center. I think that looks fine. You can modify that as much as you want. Maybe you bring that up to 6 millimeters. Again, that's just going to go slightly too big here. So you have a bunch of options there. I'm going to go 5. I think that works for me. And all I'm going to do is do that the entire way up. So 0.25. 0.4, 0.6, 0.8 on both sides, call it a day. Save myself a little time. I'm going to Command C, Command V over to the other side. Again, just so I don't necessarily have to do the same thing over again. Make your life easier, work smarter, not harder. All right, text is done. Next step, just to extrude it down, same way we just did I'm not going to do a deep extrusion at all. Maybe 2 millimeters, maybe 1 millimeter. Again, I don't know what's going to look nice, so I'm just going to go through and experiment with that here. So I might click extrude, click on my individual text for each one, and again, maybe I'll bring this down, -1 to start. Oops. Click enter. Let me see. Again, I think that looks fine. You can go deeper if you want. I'm not looking for anything crazy. 0.1 is good for me. Same thing, just repeat that for the other tiers. And just like that, we're looking like we're in pretty good shape. All right, so we're finished with the nozzles, we're finished with the openings for those, finished with the labels. Let's get on to the screwdrivers and the wrenches. So screwdrivers are gonna be very easy. The wrenches themselves are gonna be just a tad bit more difficult. The nice part about the wrenches is they have a taper to them. So the opening that we are going to make here is going to be a 9 millimeter by a 2 millimeter opening, okay? So I'm gonna do the same thing from here, right? I'm gonna make my guidelines. I'm gonna do 1 millimeter over, 2 millimeters up, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the other side here. We'll go 1 by 2, oops. There we go. Okay, so now that I have that done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make my actual rectangle themselves. Okay, and one of the things I need to keep in mind with these is if I'll put a picture of the wrench on the screen here, is we just need to make sure that they're not going to be knocking into each other as they're on here. So we can't fit all 10 on, which is totally fine. Hopefully I don't need 10 wrenches, but what I want to do is make at least a 20 millimeter gap from center point to center, 20 millimeter distance between them. I'm not super concerned about having an exact 20 millimeter gap because my initial concern is just going to be making sure that they're spaced evenly and that they look nice. So I'm going to go to my rectangular pattern tool. And again, I'm going to do the same exact thing where I drag this over and just make sure, if I zoom in here, that it lines up with that corner that we made so we know they're exactly spaced apart evenly from the beginning. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a couple here until I think it looks pretty nice. I don't think we can go 8. I'm going to go 7 and then just kind of check what that's going to be looking like. So if I would go center point here to center point here, I actually need to go down 1, which is fine. So if I need to edit that, I can just double click on this part here. I'm going to bring that down 1 to 6. Open that up there, and again, I can go center point to center point here. Even that's going to be close, so my apologies. I'm going to need to go down 1 more. Double click, down to 5. There we go. That should be perfect. Okay, so they lined up perfectly on the end. Perfect separation in between. Excellent. Now, in terms of the depth of these openings, I'll be honest, I didn't really measure what point it tapers down to 9 inches. So what I just did is did the complete length of the handle itself, which is going to be about 45 millimeters. So I'm just going to make them 45 millimeters deep. And at the end of the day, it saves material as well. It might not be perfect, but again, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for organization. -45. Boom, done. Not going out the bottom. Perfect. Now I'm going to do the exact same process with the screwdrivers themselves. All right, so now that I have the openings for my wrenches done, what I'm going to do is start working on my screwdrivers. So the screwdrivers I think are going to be pretty easy. It is a 3 millimeter actual screwdriver shank itself, so it's going to be easy for me to make that opening. The handle will be the part that holds it on top of the organizer. So I'm going to do the same exact thing I did earlier. I'm going to go 3 millimeters and then maybe 2 millimeters over. And then what I'm going to do is I know they're going to be 3.5 millimeter openings, so I have a little bit of wiggle room there. So I'm just going to cut this down to 1.75. That way I have that opening there and do the exact same thing. So now I go back into here. I'm going to make my 3.5 millimeter opening. I click on the opening, go to create. Ooh, that's not what I want. Rectangular pattern tool. Click on that piece here. And again, I'm going to drag it over, excuse me, just so it lines up perfectly with that point. And then I just crank this back up to 10. And that will be perfect. Then I'm going to do, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Right click, edit sketch, Go back to my home tool, hit extrude. Try not to click that, drives me nuts. We're gonna be sliding. All right, perfect. We have all these ready to go. So the actual length of that screwdriver head is going to be about 20 millimeters. I'm going to give myself a little wiggle room just so I know it's going to be pushing, or it's actually going to be caught by the handle of the screw rather than like poking the bottom. So I might go just 22 millimeters. Again, saving a little bit of filament there. So I'm going to bring this down to negative 22. Hit enter. And I think that looks pretty awesome. So last but not least here, you know, with the previous project, we're making some fillets, making it look pretty nice. So just go into my fillet tool. I'm gonna do everything but the back and the bottom. So that's the build. So now the plan would be to save this file, get it on the printer, and start printing. The nice part about this is there shouldn't be any supports. It shouldn't be a long print, and it'll help your space get a little bit more organized. All right, so post-print, here is the final product. It's a little blurry to see, so I'm going to add some pictures on the screen now. But it's a super simple build, something that's very easy to put together. It took maybe 20 minutes of build time. I think that's being generous. And then just a couple hours of print time. And you have something that's going to keep all of your important pieces for your printer in one spot. So in the never-ending battle that is my classroom organization, I think this is a small step forward, but something that is going to greatly help my classroom flow, so I'm not looking for stuff during class. I have it ready to go. I know exactly where it's going to be, and we're going to go from there. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, any comments, please put them down below. I would love to chat with you. And if you have any suggestions for other videos, other things to organize, any just overall feedback about the video itself, I truly would love to hear it. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.